Welcome, everyone, to our eighth weekly video cast where we talk about a different topic, usually cultural or current events, live on with a group of participants that were recruited from online. Today, we expect around 40 to 50 people to be on the conversation. Today's conversation is about sports. We're going to talk about just general perceptions about sports and relationship in life, as well as just around different changes specifically about viewing habits or following of different sports to kind of like what they people imagine changing going forward. So for today's conversation, again, we're going to kind of go through that. We're going to get started now by just kind of loading up some instructions for the participants. I will be hosting. My name is Jeff. I'm here at Remesh, and we'll get started. So just going to send over some instructions to the participants um, and get them ready to talk about sports. So I'll give the participants a few moments here to read through all of those instructions, and then we will get started. I think our first question is going to be related to what is why is your favorite sport the way your favorite sport. So we'll go through that a little bit, and then we'll get into the meat of like changing habits and so forth around both sports, and then views on how youth sports are different now than they were when the people that we're talking to were growing up, just to try to understand a little bit around differences and changes happening in perspective here. So I think we're giving people a moment to go through and read about the instructions of how this is going to work. We're going to already kind of just get started and see if everyone's ready to go to talk about sports today, and go from there. I will assume that most people are ready to go, but you never know. We'll wait to actually hear back from everyone. Um, Go from there. So we are doing this live on YouTube. So for those that are joining live, thanks for joining on today. And then as well as this will be then viewable later on afterwards. So if you're viewing this later on, thanks for coming back and joining and viewing the video here. Everyone is ready to go. So let's get started. So we're first just going to ask kind of a warm-up question, make an argument about why your favorite sport is the best sport. So actually, as the participants joined the session today, we asked them some things around demographics and so forth. We also just asked them what their favorite sport was. So we're going to be able to kind of like combine that insight as we ask them as they join to what they say here to now as they go through this exercise here. So as participants start to actually participate, there's going to be kind of a quick view of what's going on here. So we've got tricks and so forth to football being from Texas, tennis because it's exciting. Get a couple different perspectives here of why sport is the best. So kind of up next, let me see what we're going to ask next. We could always, in the course of the conversation, change up. I'm thinking I'm going to talk about the fact that I'm a soccer fan, grew up playing soccer, and just like the fluidity of the game, the kind of the passion that comes along with the fan base, as well as just the how the game gets played out and so forth. So definitely curious to kind of like look into some of this information on what people are saying about favorite sports and why. Baseball looks like it's kind of up there at the beginning now, and kind of changing up. So we're seeing some different perspectives here. Basketball involves teamwork and intelligence, um, crowd participation. So there's some element of whether it's the playing of it or the actual kind of like watching and interaction and experience of a specific sport. So I'm gonna go in here and tell everyone that I'm a big soccer fan, and then we'll go into further questions. Um, um, this is a very open-ended question. I'm not exactly sure exactly how people are going to respond to this, but asking them, just tell me about your relationship with sports. Give them a minute and 45 seconds to respond to that. And then we'll kind of, while we're waiting for them to respond to that question, starting to see what comes in, you go ahead and look at what people said to the last question in terms of why their favorite sport is the best sport. We can see a couple different things here up top around just the overall group. We see basically we provide a list of responses from the group. We also rate them based on how much the group agrees with these statements or what their opinion of each statement is, as well as provide what we call a consensus score, which is how much agreement or alignment there is on that rating of it. So you see here, these are more highly popular answers. 70s, upper 60s, but lower consensus. And that just means that there's some different opinions here. That on average these are highly rated, but not everyone rates it that way. And so we can kind of dive in and look at different things. I'm just checking on where we're at. The current question, but if I go to that, so all right, favorite sport, and I want to look at just people that in the beginning said that there was baseball, and kind of see what they said. So best sport because each individual can have a major impact on the result of the game because there are many strategic components involved in each game. Versus if I say football, just around like football is life in Texas, sport yield unpredictable outcomes, great crowd participation, great action, so forth. I'm not sure. Like if we let's see if we have any soccer fans. Looks like there's only one soccer fan here in this group. Exciting to watch and very competitive. But we're almost done with the next question. So I'm going to already kind of get prepared. We can dive back into that as we go through. But kind of the cool part of these is that like I'm learning a little bit about the group and what they think about these things as we go along. So we're going to ask them if you could change one thing about your favorite sport, what would it be? Again, we're going to be able to link that back to favorite sports as they answered as they joined the conversation. But all right, so like, tell me about your relationship with sports. So I don't play much, but I like to watch other people play. So I guess I have a strange relationship with sports. So I think that's an interesting trying to understand like that relationship between playing sports and then following on with that in terms of the sports that you play or played growing up, and then how that relates to what you then now watch or follow from a sport, to just the fact that you don't play much, but it's a way or an escape, somewhat different from what you know personally, to in terms of what sports are out there and what you watch. So we can see a little bit of that here, kind of from like the actual. I played a lot of sports growing up, and then kind of what that follows that watching focus to that it's the opposite of what I am, but kind of what they're looking for, physical relationship, kind of the even difference of sports being important from a mental and physical health, and that focus of it versus like the specific like growing up and kind of history, and experience with that to like only watch on television, and so forth, kind of to even following every race on Formula One as well as following the subreddit on that, really focusing in on the fan, like from a more passionate level, and really understanding not just the watching of it, but on all the intricacies and other things that are going on in the sport. Yeah, cool. All right, so I'm going to dig into some of these on what would they change about their favorite sport, after we ask kind of this quick question about have the sports you follow changed recently. So trying to understand, are there changes in habits and sports that you follow? Are they changing? Are they not changing? While we're waiting, that'll get a quick peek on this, and we'll dive back into this in terms of what would they change about sports commercials, designated hitter in American League, making the rules that are making the game safer distracts from the sport, makes it less fun to watch. Bring back 3 out of 5 sets for finals and all tournaments. Better coverage for each player, fewer traumatic brain injuries, so forth. So some variety of different things that people said. So I'm curious to dive in that. We have some people that changed, majority that have not changed what sports they follow. We're going to ask kind of very quickly, what has driven that, whether it's to change or to remain the same. To just understand what drives people. Is it again? Is it related to what you grew up to, just habit, to just nothing else interesting, to maybe people that have changed? Well, what's the say? What's changed, or what's driving your change? What's driving those interests? Um, Seeing some, mainly the first initial responses are related to things that they're not changing. So we're going to really look into kind of like that breakdown. We're going to be able to use that last question for the people that did say it changed, why they say it changed, versus the people that said they have not changed and why they have not changed. Yeah, as we're waiting for that, let's look at what we heard from that last group. So again, if I wanted to go into that favorite sport and look at basketball fans versus football fans, commercials, longer play times, fewer traumatic brain injuries, a variety there. So let's see where we're at right now in terms of the most recent question. What has driven that change? Um, So leadership changes in Formula One. I guess that might have changed some of the habits there. I personally am not as familiar with Formula One racing, so I can't comment too much on that. And so forth. Um, cool. So we're going to shift into a little bit. What has been one of your favorite sports storylines in the last few years? Like what, like just trying to understand like what's been memorable, what's been that thing that stood out. So gonna get a perspective on, like, are these the personal things? Like, for me, I from Cleveland, Ohio. So one of the things that obviously stands out is us finally being able to bring home a championship with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and so that for me is most memorable because of that, versus um, kind of the less personal and just like what has been just really dramatic and really interesting and maybe not as much personal connection. So trying to understand a little bit about those differences and so forth. So national anthem protest is something that stands out. Phelps winning Olympic gold. Not major storylines. The rise of the Pirates. It looks like we have some Pirates fans in here after 20 straight losing seasons. LeBron crying. I obviously disagree with that, but everyone has their opinion, especially when it comes to sports. Everyone's on a different side. Underdog wins. So forth. Cool. So as we're going into that, like, let's look at some of these responses to that last question. What has driven the change? Again, if I wanted to specifically, as sports follow change, the people that said yes, what did they say? Kind of as I've aged, I've gotten less interested in football and basketball, so I've gradually started watching either other stuff, NASCAR, cycling, swimming, leadership change in Formula One, statistics, ill long-term effects from the sports, focus a bit more on college sports over professional sports. Rules are too hard to change. Dallas Cowboys have gotten rid of a lot of players, so their favorite personal team. They've seen changes there, so just less is interested in that. Obviously, they probably lived through the '90s when the Dallas Cowboys were amazing, and now they're not as amazing. They're not awful. So I feel like that can change or skew your perspective on sports. Um, all right, so we're going to shift to this one. A little bit different. How do you feel playing sports today as a youth is different than from when you grew up? So I'm imagining there's going to be a little bit of some things around safety. So safety is a bigger deal now than probably earlier years. There's probably some like more structure. I think there's a lot of um, focus on the kind of like structured sports and tournaments and teams and so forth. Parents shuttling around children everywhere, which is probably different than that just ad hoc playing in, like a lot of focus on playing in the yard, playing in the street, and so forth. I saw something around social media and how that's changed, which is actually interesting. And around like how does that impact like what people taking videos of like even like lower level or earlier sports and how that gets shared and so forth and how that focuses and changes the perspective of sports. Um, Kids these days aren't as active. some people are still growing up, so nothing's changed. Less localized today. It's way less localized today. Participation ribbons not as competitive. So the challenge against or people what people say about like millennial generation, just this focus on winning awards or ribbons for participating versus just the competition of actually winning, and that's the only thing where you're being rewarded for. Um, Better technology. It's actually really interesting from equipment in terms of like both from shoe technology to other types of technology from any of the different sports and how that has affected and changed the way that sports are played. Forth. Right. So we're going to go into right now. I'm just going to shift really quickly into there's talk about baseball falling in popularity in uh, US recently. So we're going to put that statement out there. I'm just going to say, here's and then let people say um, kind of arguments of why that could be, and then actually ask them, do you actually agree with that or not? So, not going to ask them to tell me whether they agree with that first. We're going to ask them about that afterwards. But first, just going to ask them why they think that could be happening. So, yeah, looking into this last question around sports today as a youth versus when they grew up, and obviously that might change if I look at specifically by age or so forth here. But yeah, I think a lot better technology, more focus on safety precautions, more focus on safety. Awards are given too often when there be one award and that's the winning team. So it's an interesting change of how what role do sports play like in growth and development. Whether there's the side of team and working together as a team and camaraderie with other kids. There's also the side of like how does it inspire and instill competitiveness and drive within kids' personalities as they grow and develop as well. And so, does that change that? Not exactly sure, but it's actually an interesting point to think through. Cool. So if I did want to say, all right, like for this one, even just the age, like if I want to look at obviously a younger group, what does that mean? Or what do those people say awards are giving up? So I'm still growing up, obviously. More safety precautions. Let's see what the group is that's actually older than that, what they say about that. More injuries. Parents take sports much more seriously than mine did. Safety issues. That's Let's check in on where our current question is. What arguments do you have for what could be happening? I think because games are so long and people think it's slow, people aren't interested. Other sports have more money and advertising's not hyped up. Too slow for young people to follow. 162 games, 4 hours each. Yep. So now we're going to kind of ask the group here specifically if they do agree with that or not. Um, and then we'll be able to look at that as something to very quickly gauge some of these responses as well afterwards. So yeah, games are long, games are too long, boring, games take too long, a lot of the same, boring to watch on TV, way too long, um, so forth. It's a lot about that length. So, is there opportunity? Is that true? Is that a concern for baseball? Are there opportunities to make it more interesting and less boring in terms of the speed of the game, the length of the game, anything that obviously from a traditional sense that could be actually interesting to see how that actually plays out if changes are made, like how that impacts the integrity of the game. Gonna quickly shift to and we have a couple minutes left with these folks, but shift to around fantasy sports. So like kind of like how do you feel the rise of fantasy sports has impacted sports watching today? Um, so initial responses are not sure. Um, Obviously, I think there's some impact. Some people will say just around the focus and quick nature of how they're watching sports versus watching one game or watching games that they care about and personally interested in versus NFL Red Zone or other types of channels or watching habits that are more suited towards checking in on lots of different games and so forth. Um, And then finally, we're going to ask one last question, which is how do you view sports in the US changing moving forward? Oh, yeah. So there's some comments like a little bit around like makes people less interested in the actual game and more interested in themselves, more interested in statistics, perhaps gives incentive to watch all games instead of only home teams, which is kind of the opposite side. Like, so there's a positive side of you people are watching more games and more variety or more breadth of the games that are happening versus just one game. One could argue in terms of like the how it shifts focus on tracking and understanding what's going on in the regular season versus playoff time and how people are actually maybe perhaps more invested in that. So I'm quickly going to ask this last question, and then we'll let these people go. But let's dive into this last question before we do that. So, makes people less interested in the actual game. It's increased some interest into sports as people are playing for money. I would rather bet on statistics than take time to actually watch a game now. Yes, women might actually care about the game now. Um, People are more invested in their teams and players winning. People watch Red Zone instead of their favorite team. Makes more engaging to watch, which is definitely interesting. Focus on individuals rather than teams. So, a lot of different responses here. Makes it more dynamic. So cool. And then finally, to this last question. All right, what do you view U.S. sports in the U.S. changing moving forward? I think probably get more e-games on TV. Expect the popularity to continue to decline, become more divided. Um, Grow and prosper in tradition. I just say going anywhere. Sports will be optimized for delivering commercials. That's actually interesting, and how that plays into the watching experience, and obviously the viewership and the money available for that viewership. Um, More emphasis on esports. So some of that's like the online gaming and other communities where that's now getting a large following and large kind of focus on in terms of more physical or different physical sports. So cool. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and tell everyone that we are all done. Before we sign off, I'm going to very quickly go into that last question just to see kind of what else has been said amongst the group. Slow decline in football, not much change in other leagues in the foreseeable future. Very popular form of entertainment. So this kind of the group overall around the slow decline in football. More technology being introduced, more ways of watching, more skills based because of evolution. Hope U.S. sports continue to thrive, become able to compete with other teams throughout the world. I think we'll probably get more e-games on the TV. Cool. Stay about the same. Think interest in sports will decrease. More technologically involved. Cool. So I will then post the link to be able to analyze the data from this conversation within the YouTube comments. So if you do want to be able to check that out afterwards, you can kind of go through this conversation yourself and go a little bit more deeply into the data and start to look at what you've learned about the group and what they think about sports in the U.S., particularly to the subjects and the questions that we asked. But in the meantime, I just want to thank everyone for joining today and have a good rest of your day.